You feel it before you even know it's happening. A subtle shift in your spirit. A strange stillness in the air, like something invisible just brushed past you. You don't know why, but your heart skips. Your thoughts slow. Your breath deepens. And then, almost casually, the phone rings. But this isn't casual. This isn't random. This isn't just another notification in your day. No, this is something deeper, something older, something that was already in motion long before the sound ever reached your ears. Because in the spiritual realm, every physical interaction is a shadow of what has already occurred in the invisible. You didn't just receive a call. You were called in the spirit long before the device ever lit up, before fingers pressed digits, before the line connected. A ripple had already been released into the fabric of your reality. The moment someone decided to reach for you, their spirit, or the spirit behind them, had already touched yours. That call you thought was a coincidence? It was already waiting in the wings of your destiny, hovering like a coded signal waiting for the right vibration. Nothing comes to you in this season by chance. Heaven doesn't deal in randomness. Everything is encoded, orchestrated, precise. There are forces at work, divine intelligences beyond your comprehension, that know the exact moment your soul becomes ready for the next instruction. The moment your inner gate opens just wide enough to receive something sacred. So don't be surprised if the call doesn't come from who you expected. Don't be shocked if it shows up with a strange number, a wrong name, or a forgotten voice from a season you thought was over. Because heaven doesn't need conventional methods to get your attention. It just needs alignment. And when the atmosphere of your soul reaches a frequency that matches the message finds you. That's why you've been feeling off lately. Restless, detached from the noise, but deeply attuned to the silence. That's not a mood. That's spiritual preparation, because something is being sent to you, not through thunder, not through lightning, but through something seemingly ordinary, a ringtone, a vibration, a voice on the line. But don't miss it. Don't dismiss it, because this isn't about the person calling. This is about the portal the call opens. In that moment, time bends, realities overlap. You are no longer just a person holding a phone. You become a receiver of divine intelligence. And everything you've been asking for, praying for, preparing for it, starts with that sound, that moment, that connection. Because the call is more than a conversation. It is a catalyst, a confirmation, a cue from heaven that says, you are ready now. You're not crazy for feeling like something big is coming. You're not paranoid for sensing meaning in the mundane. Your spirit is picking up what your mind cannot yet explain. That's discernment. And discernment is the language of the chosen. You didn't imagine the chills. You didn't fabricate the pull. You are being summoned. And the signal is hidden in plain sight. The phone rings. But what's really ringing is your soul. And this time, you have the strength to answer. You didn't speak it out loud, but heaven heard you anyway. That silent, trembling prayer, the one that never made it past your lips, rose higher than the loudest shout. Because when your heart breaks in the secret place, it sends a signal that bypasses all logic, all noise, all delay. It reaches the highest realm, the seat of the holy, where nothing gets lost and no tear goes unnoticed. You prayed, not with words, but with ache. And that ache became a beacon, a pulse in the spiritual realm that said, I can't take this anymore, but I still believe. And that was enough, because that kind of raw surrender carries a frequency too strong to be ignored. It doesn't echo aimlessly, it registers. It activates response. It sets coordinates in the invisible realm. And when the time is right, when your soul can bear the weight of the reply, the response comes not in thunder or lightning, but in a voice, a name, a number blinking on your phone at the exact moment you stopped expecting it. You think it's random, but it's not. That call is the evidence. That someone you haven't spoken to in years. That unknown number that kept calling until you finally answered. They don't even know why they reached for you. But something inside them whispered, now. Something pushed them with a quiet urgency. That's how heaven moves. Through nudges, through divine interruptions, through ordinary people who become vessels without knowing it. They're the courier, the messenger, the living response to your silent plea. And when they call, they may not even say what you expect, but your spirit will recognize it. Because the moment they speak, something inside you begins to breathe again. You remember. You realign. You realize this was the answer you didn't even know how to ask for. And that's the beauty of it. Prayer isn't always about asking. It's about synchronizing, about bringing your spirit into alignment with what's already been written. When you reach that moment of total release, when you finally gave up trying to force the outcome, something sacred opened, not outside of you, but within you. And in that opening, God sent confirmation, not to change your situation instantly, but to say, I heard you, I never left you, and no, you are not forgotten. Because real transformation begins not when you receive everything you asked for, but when you receive a signal that you've been seen. And sometimes that signal wears skin. Sometimes it speaks through the voice of a person you never thought would return. Sometimes it shows up as a misdialed number that somehow knows your pain. Sometimes it's not even the content of the call, but the timing, the perfect, piercing timing that breaks you open again in the best way. That's when you know it wasn't just a person. It was the Spirit, using someone who could feel your name on their soul. They were stirred, awakened, moved without understanding why. Because your prayer didn't fade into silence. It became a wave, and the response was already on its way before you even realized you needed one. And that phone call, that simple vibration on your nightstand, is the knock from heaven reminding you, the moment you let go, the miracle started moving. Not with flashes, not with trumpets, but with stillness, with divine accuracy, with a human voice sent to carry a supernatural message. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are heard. And now, it's time to pick up. There's a reason the chaos came before the call. A reason why your spirit felt like it was under siege without warning. It wasn't random. It wasn't emotional fatigue or mental confusion. It was a targeted disruption, timed down to the second, because the enemy can detect the frequency of a miracle even before you know one's coming. Darkness doesn't need to know the details, they just need to feel the vibration shift in your field. And when that shift happens, when heaven starts to move on your behalf, it sets off alarms in the unseen. Because what's coming for you doesn't just bless you, it breaks chains, it ends cycles, it reclaims territory the enemy thought was his. That's why the pressure intensifies right before the breakthrough. That's why the noise increases when you try to quiet your soul. That's why your emotions have been swinging wildly. The enemy isn't trying to steal the miracle. He knows he can't. So instead, he comes for your focus. He comes for your faith. He comes for your capacity to receive. Because he knows, if you pick up that call in the right moment, with the right spirit, you'll hear something that was meant to liberate you. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Once you receive it, it starts changing everything. That's why the battle began before the call came. That's why the atmosphere got heavy. That's why you suddenly felt tired, irritated, even doubtful. It wasn't coincidence, it was coordinated. Because the closer you get to the portal of transformation, the more desperate the enemy becomes to keep you from walking through it. But here's the secret many don't know. The enemy doesn't fear the call itself. He fears your belief in it. He fears the moment you take it seriously. The moment you discern it's not just a conversation, it's a heavenly key. A shift wrapped in syllables. A destiny encoded in dialogue. So he throws everything he can to make you miss it. He whispers lies that sound like your own thoughts. He sends distractions, offenses, emotional triggers. He knows if he can get you to react instead of discern, you'll disqualify yourself from receiving the very thing you've been praying for. So many chosen ones have missed their moment because they judged the package. They dismissed the voice. They ignored the nudge. They were too upset to answer, too distracted to receive, too guarded to believe. And so, the call came and left. Not because they weren't chosen, but because they weren't present. They weren't still enough. They weren't ready in spirit. And that's what the enemy counts on. He knows that one properly timed phone call, one divinely assigned voice, can destroy everything he built against you for years. That's all it takes. One person with the anointing. One conversation, carrying deliverance. One word that unlocks your memory of the covenant you made with heaven. And if you answer in faith, it breaks the stronghold. That's why the warfare intensifies before the call. That's why the storm hits just before the release. Because what's coming isn't just a word, it's a shift. And if you can survive the final wave, if you can stay grounded when everything screams confusion, if you can hold your peace in the middle of the psychic noise, You will hear what no one else is hearing. You will step into what no one else was positioned to receive. You will answer a call that was never random, it was always revelation. You thought the call was missed. You thought heaven forgot. But what really happened was a divina delay. Because if that phone had rung when your heart was still cluttered, you would have misheard the message. You would have twisted the instruction through the filter of fear, not faith. So the Spirit pressed pause, not as punishment, but as protection. In the realm of the Spirit, silence is strategy. And when heaven holds back, it's because your signal is too noisy. The static of old beliefs still clings to your frequency. The wounds you didn't heal still echo doubt in your mind. So heaven waits, because no divine upgrade will be downloaded into a system still crashing under the weight of past trauma. The angels know you can't install what's holy on top of what's haunted. This is why the call didn't come when you begged for it. Because you were still operating under expired programming, still answering life with reflexes rooted in survival, not alignment. And if you heard the prophetic instruction too soon, you would have tried to control it. You would have ran ahead of it. You would have ruined it. So the Holy Spirit intercepted the moment, delayed the signal, and fenced off your atmosphere with spiritual firewalls. You thought you lost the moment, but what you really lost was the illusion of control. And that's when the sacred timing began. Because heaven doesn't lose track. Heaven keeps secrets until you're safe enough to hold them. Until your soul has matured past manipulation. Until your discernment is sharp enough to tell the difference between a God-sent call and a demonic imitation using a familiar voice. The enemy speaks in whispers that almost sound true. Almost, but not quite. That's why God silenced the lines. Not to frustrate you, but to filter out the false. He wouldn't let you pick up the phone while wearing the garment of your old identity, because your next assignment can't fit inside the mindset of your last season. So he waited for you to lay down the bitterness, waited for you to unclench your fists, waited for you to stop negotiating with your destiny. Only then does the call get rescheduled. Some calls are not denied. They're deferred, held in a vault of perfect timing, released only when your inner world stops spinning, when your thoughts grow still, when your heart becomes quiet enough to hear the whisper beneath the noise. Because time isn't just time. It's a divine cipher, a holy code. And until you reach the exact spiritual temperature, you don't get access. Not because you're rejected, but because you're being refreshed. God's not hiding the message. He's healing the receiver. You never missed the call. You were shielded from it until your soul reached the clarity needed to receive. Heaven doesn't drop keys into trembling hands. It waits until you can grip them without fear. That's not a delay. That's love. So the next time you look at your phone and see no bars, but feel an eerie calm wrap around your chest, understand this. You're entering the range, the sacred range, where Earth's signals fail, but heaven's frequency starts to break through. And when your soul finally whispers, "I'm ready," the call won't be lost. It will return, like it never left, because it was never gone, just pending, just waiting for you. You felt the call before it ever came, but what you didn't know is your soul was already answering, because your spirit doesn't wait on time. It runs ahead. It senses movements in the invisible long before your mind can catch up. That chill that came out of nowhere, that strange heaviness in the room, that "I've been here before" feeling that made your skin tighten, it wasn't your imagination. It was the realm of spirit brushing past you like wind off the wings of something sacred. There are places your body stands, but your soul has already walked them. There are moments your eyes witness, but your spirit saw them long ago. That's what they call déjà vu, but it's not just memory. It's memory written in fire. It's a spiritual echo of a scene you agreed to before you were wrapped in flesh. And when it plays again in real time, it's a warning, a reminder that something is aligning. A promise is about to be fulfilled. You think it's just a strange chill, but chills like that don't come from temperature. They come from presence. When heaven draws near, when a messenger enters your space, your nervous system responds because your spirit recognizes what your logic can't name. That's not paranoia. That's prophetic intelligence. When an angel steps into your atmosphere, the air bends. The frequency shifts. You feel it in your spine, in your gut, in the way your skin tightens like it's trying to remember. Because it is remembering. It's recalling the vow you made to wake up when this moment came. And now the moment has arrived. The phone hasn't even rung yet, but your soul is already bracing. Not in fear, but in recognition. This is the frequency of something holy. This is the energy of a prepared word. Something is about to be revealed. Chosen one. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. It's a signature. You were marked by the divine to pick up on what others ignore. You don't just hear sound. You feel the spirit behind it. You don't just receive messages. You discern the energy riding on them. You were built to feel the shift before it shakes the room. When that sudden stillness wraps around you like an invisible cocoon. When the atmosphere goes quiet like it's holding its breath. That's not ordinary silence. That's spiritual pause. It's the breath before the trumpet. It's the hush before the word lands. And that's why, when the phone rings, you already know. You already feel what's on the other side. Because your soul felt it coming. Not 5 seconds ago, but 5 lifetimes ago. The reason your heart beat faster wasn't anxiety. It was anticipation. A heavenly data packet was just pushed to the edge of your awareness. And your biology registered the moment before your thoughts could speak. That's not overthinking. That's alignment. When the veil gets thin, the signs get strange. Ringing ears. Cold air. Still time. Spiritual static that makes the hairs on your neck salute something you can't see. Don't ignore it. Don't brush it off. Don't rationalize what your spirit already confirmed. Because this isn't just a phone call. It's a divine delivery. And if you're still enough, if you're silent enough, if you're open enough, you'll hear the sound behind the sound. And when you answer, heaven will speak. And just when you think you've moved on, just when you've buried that chapter so deep it no longer echoes, that's when God sends the one you least expect. Not to reopen the wound, but to deliver the key. A key they didn't even know they carried. Because they're not coming back on their own. They are being pulled, summoned, activated by a covenant neither of you remember. But heaven never forgot. You see, there are promises stored in time. Bonds that didn't break. They just went quiet, frozen, waiting for the right moment in the divine timeline. And now, that moment has arrived. You tried to forget them. You tried to erase the memory. But heaven archived the interaction. Because what your mind rejected, your soul still recognizes. The past is knocking, not to haunt you, but to awaken. A promise you once laid down. In the middle of your pain, that person you blocked, cut off, buried in silence. What if they're the only one who saw the raw, unfiltered version of your becoming? What if they were never meant to be your ending, but your witness, someone who saw you in seed form, and now returns to confirm, the harvest has come. God doesn't just use the people you still admire. He uses the ones you had to forgive, even the ones who never said sorry. That call that makes your chest tighten, the one that stirs your anger before you say hello. Pause, because hidden inside that voice might be the breaking of a cycle that's been circling your bloodline for years. Some souls orbit your life because your energies once intertwined in a holy blueprint. You both touched eternity, and eternity doesn't forget. So when you shift dimensions, when your spirit levels up, they feel it too. And suddenly, without explanation, they call, not because they miss you, not because they want something, but because their soul heard something move in yours. They were drawn by the magnetic pull of a spiritual gate opening, a gate you just stepped through. No one reappears twice without purpose. There are no accidental callbacks in the kingdom. So if someone returns, at the very moment you've been on your knees, asking for clarity, asking for confirmation, asking for a sign, that's your sign. They are not just a person. They are a message in flesh. And sometimes, God doesn't say, I remember you. He sends someone else to say it for him. The voice on the other end might trigger you, yes, but it also might free you. Because to truly close a door, you must face it, open it, and walk through it. In power, they didn't come back to chain you. They came back so you could finally prove you're no longer in the cage. They're not your test anymore. They're your testimony. God may disguise a sacred confirmation in the voice of someone you once labeled as a lesson. But this time, they're not coming to teach. They're coming to witness what the prophecy has become. So if you receive a call from someone you thought irrelevant, listen, not to the words, but to the spirit behind the sound. Because love often hides in forgiveness, and heaven's voice often speaks through the last person you ever wanted to hear from. You've been crying out for answers, but ignoring the message marked unknown. You want thunder. You're waiting on lightning, but God already spoke. In the quiet, in the voicemail, in the voice you dismissed because it didn't look divine enough. You thought it was spam. You thought it was random, but the Spirit never sends random. You asked for confirmation, and heaven sent a voice. But because it didn't come wrapped in glory, you scrolled past the sacred. This is your warning. There are messages you've missed because they were too normal to feel supernatural. But the Spirit hides in the ordinary. You keep looking for angels with wings, but God's messenger might have left a message in your inbox, right next to the ones you deleted. Because in the spiritual world, some messages are locked behind humility. They don't open unless you have the courage to listen to what you once avoided. That missed call from someone you wrote off, that's the voice you've been praying to hear. Not because they have the answers, but because their words contain a code, a breadcrumb, a map fragment, a divine nudge you didn't expect. From a source you didn't like, you asked, "Where's my next step?" And the answer was already there, trapped in a voicemail you haven't played. GPS from heaven, sitting still in your phone, waiting for your faith to press play. You said, "Lord, speak to me." He did, but you didn't recognize his voice because it didn't echo through clouds. It spoke through a number you forgot, through a name that triggered your old self. This is how the divine tests your spiritual hearing. Can you hear God? In the mundane? In the misdialed? In the forgotten? Some messages don't come with a halo. They come in stutters, in nervous tones, in voices that didn't even know why they felt compelled to call. Because angels sometimes borrow ordinary mouths to deliver extraordinary blueprints. That voicemail? It's not a feeling. It's not nostalgia. It's a seed. It carries coordinates. Not for emotion, but for motion. It may only be a name, a date, a cryptic sentence. But if you've been praying for direction, that might be your sign you overlooked. Voicemail isn't the past. It's present, frozen. It's a door still closed because you haven't listened long enough to unlock it. The universe does not delete divine assignments. It waits. It waits on your maturity, your discernment, your obedience. Not every call needs to be answered, but some calls leave trails, clues, threads. You've been asking for the path. It might be hidden in the echo of something you ignored. And that's not a coincidence. That's strategy. One missed message could be the key that topples the chain. Like the final domino, like the ignition spark. But you've overlooked it. Not because it was weak, but because it was subtle. Miracles aren't always loud. Sometimes they sound like static, like breath, like an old friend saying your name once and hanging up. You skipped it, but your spirit didn't. That's why it keeps bringing you back. Because what didn't touch your ears still rattled your soul. That voicemail wasn't a mistake. It was a test. Can you find God when his voice is wrapped in the familiar? You're waiting for the trumpet blast, but he already whispered, and he's watching to see if you still know how to hear him through the noise. But listen closely now, because the enemy isn't afraid of you talking. The enemy is afraid of you connecting. They don't care if you post, vent, or preach to the wind. They tremble when you align with the right soul at the right hour. Because when two anointed ones connect at their appointed time, a chain reaction is ignited. And that chain is not of this world. Hell doesn't need to destroy you. It only needs to disconnect you. Cut the signal. Block the frequency. Delay the connection long enough for doubt to fester in your spirit. Because what you don't realize is, every divine message carries a spiritual code, a genetic imprint from heaven. And when that message doesn't arrive, you don't just miss information. You miss activation. You miss the key to the next gate of your destiny. You think it's a bad signal. You think the call just didn't go through. But in the spirit realm, that's warfare. That's interference. That's an intentional disruption, sent to fracture what God ordained to connect. Why do you think certain people vanish? Right when your breakthrough was near? Why do texts freeze, calls drop, apps crash? Just as you were about to be encouraged, confirmed, unlocked? That's not random. That's strategic. Because the darkness knows your calendar. It studies your assignments. It reads your timeline better than you do. And it knows one call, one voice, one moment of clarity could shift everything. So it scrambles the line before the truth gets through. You start to think nobody cares. Nobody's calling. Nobody's reaching. But it's a lie. Because they did. They tried. They were sent. But their message was rerouted in the war zone between dimensions. And now you sit in silence, not knowing. You were never forgotten, only targeted. See, disconnection isn't just inconvenience. It's a psychological weapon. Because when the silence lingers, you don't just lose the message. You start losing faith. And that's the real objective. It's not about blocking the line. It's about breaking your belief. The enemy can't cancel God's will, but it will try to delay your awareness of that will. And when you delay your response to heaven's instruction, you start drifting from your own appointed hour. One missed moment, one postponed obedience, can alter the timeline of an entire season. And make no mistake, not all delays are divine. Some are demonic. Some are caused by frequencies being hijacked, signals being cloaked. You think you're just not ready. But the truth? You were ready. The call was sent, but something stepped in between. You keep calling it a glitch. But what if it's a gourd? What if your signal was jammed by something that knows? What will happen if you finally get that message? That confirmation? That release? They use technology like sorcery. Your battery dies at the worst time. Your mic cuts out when you speak truth. Your notifications vanish when someone sends hope. These aren't accidents. These are frequency strikes. You didn't lose connection. You were locked out of the line. And when you wonder why someone's silent, check the spirit before you react in the flesh. Because the one carrying your answer may not be ignoring you. They might be blocked from reaching you. The darkness knows how to cloak silence and turn allies into strangers through simple digital distortions. So don't take the silence at face value. Test the spirit. Pray through the pause. And ask the Holy Ghost to break the barrier. Because when you're chosen, even your missed calls are part of a bigger battle. And sometimes, what looks like silence is actually a war in the airwaves that only the spirit can decode. They say tests come in fire, but the greatest tests come in reflex. You think you're being judged by your actions, but heaven is watching your reactions. Not when you're ready, not when you're prayed up, but when you're caught off guard. Because that's when your true alignment is exposed. In the flash of a second. In the way you answer what you didn't expect. In the tone you use. In the assumption you make. In the decision you choose without time to dress it up in spiritual language. You didn't know the voice on the line was holy. You thought it was just noise. So you shut it down. You cut it off. You dismissed the very angel you prayed God would send. But here's the warning no one talks about. Sometimes you don't miss your season by sin. You miss it by speed. Too quick to judge. Too fast to hang up. Too impatient to perceive the divine and the unexpected. A split-second reaction, and a chain of miracles collapses before it even begins. Because that voice, that stranger, they were the final link in a chain God began years ago. And now the unlocking is delayed, not because you weren't chosen, but because your response didn't match the frequency of the promise. Heaven doesn't always knock twice. There are windows thin, rare, sacred, and sometimes a blessing is dressed in awkward timing. A call at the wrong hour, a voice with the wrong accent, a conversation that feels uncomfortable, but is actually holding your upgrade. You didn't need to be evil to miss it. You just needed to be unconscious, unaware, untrained in discernment, and unaware that spiritual maturity means seeing God's fingerprint, even in what feels like an interruption. The enemy doesn't have to destroy you. He just needs to distort your perception of the ones God sends. So he layers pain on your eyes. He coats your ears in past offense. So when the messenger shows up, you don't hear the word. You hear your wound, and so you hang up. You walk away. You dismiss your own deliverance because it didn't look like what you imagined. Sometimes the call isn't to give you anything. It's to see if your heart is still open, to test whether you value what you didn't expect. Because the most sacred opportunities come disguised in inconvenience. And the Spirit doesn't always test you through pain. Sometimes, it's through a moment you're tempted to overlook. One harsh tone, one prideful sigh, one sarcastic, hello, and the angel departs. Not because it's offended, but because the law of heaven requires honor to activate the sacred. You don't need to recognize the messenger, but you do need to respect the message. Your posture when the call comes determines whether you hear or whether it passes by. Because in the spirit realm, it's not just about what you do, it's about the frequency you emit. If you pick up with suspicion, mockery, resistance, you don't just miss information, you interrupt divine flow. And there are some chains of destiny that can only be activated when your heart is postured in humility. That's why some doors don't respond to action. They respond to attitude. They measure your emotional resonance at the threshold. If you answer with arrogance, if you dismiss with coldness, if you belittle what you didn't schedule, the gate closes, and you don't even know you just lost access. Some calls are baited with silence, not to deliver news, but to mirror you back to yourself. Heaven is checking. Have you really changed? Are you the new creation you say you are? Or are you still answering like the old version of you? The one who reacts from ego, instead of listening in spirit. Because here's the truth. In this season, one wrong response can delay what was meant to be deployed. Not because you're unworthy, but because you're not yet awake enough to hold what's holy. When it knocks without announcement, this is a prophetic warning. You are not being punished. You are being weighed. And the next call might just be the final checkpoint. Before heaven triggers your next level, you thought it was just a phone call, but not every ringtone comes from this world. Some are crafted in the spirit, wrapped in the illusion of normal, and delivered through the hands of men, but sent from heaven. This wasn't random. It wasn't routine. It was a summons, a divine tapping on the glass wall between realms. And only those who can hear in the spirit will know what just shifted when that call came through. Because God doesn't need a burning bush anymore. He can speak through satellites, through frequencies, through the very tech the enemy tried to hijack. He is the creator of all dimensions. And he's not limited by your device, only by your discernment. He can use the vibration in your pocket to open a portal in your destiny. He can use a ringtone to reactivate your soul's assignment. You feel it in your chest, that pull to act, even though the person on the other end said nothing profound. Because the transmission wasn't in the words. It was in the frequency. It was in the invisible code they didn't know they were carrying. This is what I call a silent command. You're not being asked. You're being triggered. Triggered by spirit to move, to shift, to pick up the mission you didn't know was on pause. Some assignments won't arrive through prayer. They won't be handed down in a vision or dream. They come encoded, in people, in perfectly timed moments, in calls you almost missed. When your season turns, so do your connections. The moment you step into new frequency, the ones who carry your next instructions are released toward you. And they might not look like angels. They may not even know they're being used. But when you're ready, heaven sends the delivery through vessels that match your readiness. This is how the spirit realm works. Like a mission control tower, coordinating moves in silence, pinging souls like beacons, searching for those with open channels. And one of the most unassuming channels, a phone call. Because between the chaos and distraction, a single ring can bypass your walls. It gets your attention. And before you can rationalize it, the seed has already been planted. You're being tested, not by the voice on the line, but by your response. Do you react like the old you? Do you ignore it, dismiss it as coincidence? Or do you slow down and listen different? Not all voices matter, but some are anointed for this very moment. They don't know why they felt the urge. You don't know why your heart started racing, but your spirit knows. Something ancient in you recognizes the signal, like a lock hearing its key again after years of silence. There are missions that cannot be passed down through sacred texts. They are too timed, too specific. They require live contact, sudden awareness, moments when your routine breaks and the spirit slips in through the ordinary. That's why the ringtone wasn't just a sound. It was a knock. And if you didn't hear it, the opportunity may have passed, because God will move to the next willing vessel. If you're not tuned in, you ask for sings. He gives you a call. You ignore it, waiting for thunder. But he hides in simplicity, because he's testing the sensitivity of your spirit. So if your phone buzzes, and your soul flinches without reason, pause, breathe. You might be receiving your next orders. You've been trained in silence for a battlefield you haven't yet seen. And this might be the call that activates everything you were secretly built for. Chosen one. An unexpected phone call will change your life.